Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, where we are lucky enough to be joined by some of our industry experts at Customer Driven. The session today is brought to us by Customer Driven and USU, but we've got the wonderful Nicola McDonald and Adam Nichols here. And the session today, we are going to talk all things knowledge management. The session today is called From Basics to Mastery, elevating your knowledge management practice. And it's a session that will allow you to interact and think about the opportunities in your own environment with some additional knowledge. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of our guests today, we hope this session provides some interesting insights into things that are within your control that can support and help you build a more effective operation. We'll have some polls happening throughout the session, so we always love a good poll. Hopefully we get the timing right, but if they come up and you think, what's that random poll coming up for? It really helps Nicola and Adam get a sense of where you're at as well within the conversation. So it lets them actually then tailor some of the conversation towards it, but it also gives the whole group some insights into the stages the different knowledge management practices are really at. So we'll have that happening. Make sure you participate in both those and in the session itself. To round off, we'll have Q&A at the end, but if you're anything like me, I always think of a great question, but unless I write it down, I tend to forget it. So write that question down either using the chat or the QA feature. If it's relevant to what's being covered off at that point in time, I'll actually jump in so we can make sure we stay on track and keep with that theme. But if it's something that's a little bit unrelated or a little bit left of field, we might leave that till the end of the session, but we'll make sure we get the opportunity to answer it. Make sure you actually keep utilising that feature. So I'm Fran Safford, CEO of Auscontact, and I will be your moderator for today. Some general housekeeping for you. As I said, interacting gives you the maximum opportunity to benefit from the session. It's not often you get to have experts that are actually at your absolute disposal, so make sure you pose some of those questions I've always wanted to ask and haven't had the right people around to ask them to. Don't forget you don't have to take too many notes, as we will send through the recording of the webinar once it's finalised. So we'll send that to everybody that's registered. If you're listening through a headset or your speakers, if you have any issues with that, just use the raise hand button on the control panel and one of the team will jump in and help out. Alternatively, you can actually revert to the phone numbers that are listed in the original registration email. I'm going to stop talking. I know we're actually here for the main event. I am going to introduce Nicola McDonald, who is the Head of Knowledge Management at Customer Driven, and Adam Nichols, who's the Marketing and Bid Manager also at Customer Driven. Adam, I'm going to hand over to you so we can actually kick this off and get talking KM.
Thank you very much, Fran, and welcome everyone. We're really excited to be here today. I think I speak for everyone when I say we all live and breathe continual improvement. Now, the contact center environments that we live in are an ever-evolving space. We're always looking and chasing to improve customer and staff experience, drive operational efficiency, living the dream. One of the things I love the most about contact center spaces is I'm a bit of an inner geek, so having access to the tech and tools that we have that are constantly a growing list is a lot of fun to play. But one of the things that we see as missed a lot of the time is sometimes classed as the boring stuff. It's the underlying effectiveness and governance of something like a knowledge management practice that can significantly hinder or help an organization's ability to leverage that tech and maximize the outcomes. So today, I'll be looking a lot at the process. Like with everything in contact center space, success is driven by the combination of people, process, and technology. The interdependent nature between those is so incredibly important. We can have the greatest technology, we can get the budget signed off and grab the prize. We can hire the best people, but if we don't have the underlying governance and processes to maximize those two elements, we're going to be limited in what we can achieve. And similarly, great processes and great tech without the right people can also be a hindrance. So today, as I said, we're focusing on process. One of the things I like about this is that we get to gift you some value around the tangible actions that you can take back to your environments today, review your current practices and make some changes to improve your capability without having to go cap in hand looking for more budget. So the way we're going to be looking at this today is looking at the internally developed framework that Nick and her team have developed over a number of years. It's called the KM8. It's aligned to best practice, and we live and breathe continuous improvement every day. And the framework's reviewed with each client engagement, looking for opportunities to improve and expand. One of the things I like about the framework is that it's a great guide for any organisation to build a knowledge management practice from the ground up, or alternatively, it's frequently used as an assessment tool to identify opportunities and how to improve different practices. Nick and her team have, I think, are one of the most experienced knowledge and management practices in Australia, having supported both the build and improvement for organisations in government and private spaces for a great number of years. So without further ado, I'm going to throw over to the very talented Nick to take us through the framework. We'll be looking at 4 elements today, starting off in the beginning, which is the greatest place to start with content. So Nick, over to you. Tell us, what's this element all about?
Beautiful. Thank you, Adam. It's with an introduction like that, you've really set me up with the bar quite high, but that's all right. Hopefully we can bring it to the table for everyone. So thanks for joining us today, everyone. We are here to present to you, as Adam's saying, quite a bit around our internal methodology and framework, which is what my team use in every aspect of their days. So I suppose Adam mentioned we use this framework for, I suppose, our health check and discovery packs, where we are coming into organisations and we work with organisations to sort of give them a bit of an idea of where they're currently sitting and what their areas for opportunity are. We use this framework when we're determining what is the best platform to embed within an organisation should a new KMS be required. And we use this exact framework to help us with our governance structure as well. So this framework goes across quite a lot. So we might speak about content, but is that, are we talking about writing content? Are we talking about managing content? Are we talking about what does the tool need to do in order to house that content? So there's quite a bit there. Now, as we've said here, not all content is created equal. We at Customer Driven would start by looking at where organisations are coming from. And typically when we are engaged, people are not in a contemporary KM solution. So if we start to think about our journey, where we might see some organisations that might rank quite low on our rating of KM maturity, and then start to carry that through to implementing new KM solutions, new frameworks, and how they can uplift from there. So not every organisation has the ability to embed a new KM solution, and that's okay. You'll still be able to get some value out of some of the points that we'll talk to today. So let's start with content. As Adam said, very good place to start. You cannot have a KM solution without content. Well, you can, but no one's going to use it. There's going to be nothing in there, nothing valuable for them to do. So we've got to think about the end users, who's utilising this tool, and I suppose where do we want this content to go? So we are now in a new world. It's been coming for a while. It's been on the horizon, but obviously even with our last webinar, we were speaking very heavily about AI and omni-channel and things like that. So previous webinars, we've had omni-channel as our buzzword. I think that's that one seems to be on the back burner now, and we are really looking about AI and how we can leverage our existing information. So we have a good saying, I'm sure you've all heard it before, but if you put garbage in, you are going to get garbage out in any of these situations. So whether that's garbage into our KM for our agents to consume and provide to our end customers, whether that's garbage in for our push to web strategy, and it's now presented on our website, or for our AI as well. The AI is only as good as the information it has access to, same as your agents. So now we are thinking about sort of three main categories of information. We also want to then think about how we can maintain a single source of truth and not have to duplicate all of that information. So this is where knowledge management comes in. When we look at content and look at people, particularly coming from a SharePoint environment, for example, we are looking at Word documents, we're looking at really big files and users having to find their own way around. And it can be really challenging. And I think front of mind for me is always our contact center agent. I have been that agent. I've been the person that's getting yelled at on the phone and needing to find that information quickly. So you've really got to think about the intent of your content and who needs to consume it in what time, I suppose. So when we work with organizations, we start to think about the different types of content we're going to have. So we've got, for example, our general information that maybe our new starters might need while they're in training to understand a topic, understand what it is, if we think about the energy industry, for example, they've got concessions. So what is a concession? What type of concessions do we offer? Potentially what eligibility criteria applies for all of that? It's all that background information that users will need to refer to in their early days, but as they move into their role, they may not need to refer to it as frequently any longer. We also then think about our step-by-step procedural information. That content is pretty much the backbone of your knowledge management platform. So we are wanting users to be able to come in, quickly find the procedure that they're after, and be able to follow the steps and follow the bouncing ball to get to the end of that inquiry. And the third type of content that we look for is the reference material. So you might think about fees or codes and how they may need to be used. So we've got three main categories of information, and then it comes down to the design of your content and how it all works together to surface information, I should say, at the right time for your agents. Content is probably one of the biggest pieces of this wheel. And, it comes down to things like design. Have you got the right templates in place? Are users able to identify who has written a document? Because at the end of the day, they should know that whenever they go into a document, it's always going to look the same. And I've been into organizations who have said, oh, I know that Adam wrote this document because he does something slightly different here. And I know that Nicola wrote this document because it's got this particular thing. So we want to make sure that we have, to start with, a really strong understanding of what our design looks like, what type of content we have to put into our environment or to update in our environment, and what those templates are going to look like. So how are we going to say every time you land on a procedure, this is what it looks like, and this is how we're going to maintain consistency. With that, we've seen it all at Customer Driven. We've been doing KM for I've been doing KM for Customer Driven coming up on 8 years now, and I've done KM in organizations outside of that as well. So I've been doing this for quite some time. And I'll start to sort of say, when we look at, when we first see where there's problems, and these might start to ring some little alarm bells for you or a little bit of a light bulb moment. Some of the things we've seen that haven't worked really well and indications that your KM and your content might not be working well are things like users creating their own knowledge base. We've had, and I think I've used this example before, but it's my favorite example because it blew my mind. We've had a user who carried around a folder that he'd created, and he'd print out every single procedure that he needed to know, and he'd done it all for himself. And he carried this folder to and from work every single day just so that he could handle his calls, because he did not have trust and did not have confidence in the information that was available to him. I'm sure there's many of you on the call who can also see the problems with that. As an organisation, we no longer have governance over what information is going out. We didn't know if this gentleman was actually writing down the correct processes, and how rogue he was going from what the organisation's goal of communication was. But that is what that user felt he needed to do in order to make it through. Other examples are OneDrive folders, shared folders on Teams. You see Teams chats going absolutely berserk, and your team leaders are having to sit on Teams chats to answer questions because the knowledge base just isn't great. And that all comes down to the very basics of the content, the design, what's in there, and how users are able to access it. So I might just pause there. We will maybe throw to our first poll.
If I could just summarize, I think what you said, because there was a lot of information in there, and that's one of the things I love about listening to you. I always learn more, no matter how many times I hear you speak. So what I heard you say was, when it comes to content, breaking it down into chunks of content in those three categories, so that you can selectively surface the right piece at the right time, and then coming up with a design template so that not only do people have consistency on when I look at line 3, that's where the answer is each and every time I open the document, but also it's aligned to your branding, and it's visually pleasing, because people are going to look at it a lot during the day. So when it comes to content, chunking down, thinking about the audience as far as the when and the who, and also the design template. That would be a good criteria for this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think I need to carry Adam around in my back pocket to be the Nicola translator for my world, for my life. You've got it in a nutshell there.
I think you both actually make a great team in bringing that together, because I think what we see a lot of organisations not doing, and it's one of the points you actually raised, the opportunity to tailor based on where an individual is at within that journey of knowledge within an organisation. So if you think about, your speed to competency and the types of things in stage, early stages and induction, it's really vastly different to that experienced operator who doesn't need context anymore. So I love that opportunity to really sort of personalize and, create the right environment where your people are at within an organization.
Exactly. And I think, further on in the pack, Adam and I were debating as to what our fourth topic was. And I think the one that would have talked to that a lot, Fran, was users and roles. And I think we booted it.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got time to do
Might do that another time, right? Just quickly, though, we have got a question here from Bridget that
Yes.
just says, Nicola, can you please just repeat those 3 categories of content?
Yeah, definitely. So we would refer to the general content as your overview content. You will have your procedural or your step-by-step content, and then you will have reference content. So that's more so just, it's typically tables of content that you may refer to quickly and then jump back to your procedure. So what's the code for this one? What's the fee applied to this one? No dramas. Alrighty, so as you can see on the screen, the poll has now been done, but we've got the answers coming up, which is great. So we're seeing quite a bit in the room for improvement option, which is, it's always great to know that there's room for improvement, and KM is not a set and forget. So, whilst you may have fantastic content, it's always going to have changes going on in there. So that is it's completely fine place to be, and hopefully you get some good insights out of what we talked to you today to help move ahead. And time, resources are very challenging. So that is why a lot of organizations do choose to work with customer driven, because you've got your BAU, and it's really challenging to clear the way for your BAU team to maintain business as usual, and then also move into sort of a project phase for uplift and things like that. So not using this as a sales pitch whatsoever. It's not meant to be, but of course we are always here to help out if there is anyone who is desperately in need.
Nick, please correct me where I'm wrong, but my favourite answer for time and resource is to look to development pools. And I think this is a really good opportunity, especially when talking about content, to say to your 2 ICs and people that are looking for development or top performers, hey guys, here's the template. Here's the task. We're looking to do a first pass and get as much information as we can across these 3 categories to kick the ball off to have a big bucket of something that's useful in some distinct categories.
Yeah.
And whether that's something then you're able to go and do internally or engage someone like Nick's team, which I'd strongly recommend, but I'm biased. It can certainly get you ahead of the game. And I think it'd be fair to say in most organizations, that practice alone might trigger some process redesign or some process gaps that might be highlighted through some of that. And it's a great way of getting buy-in from your team as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you are doing that sort of work to uplift your content and see if it's up to date, relevant, do we need to change it? No one knows better than your frontline agents. So, that's actually how I got into knowledge management. I was on the phones. As I said, I was the one handling those calls and inquiries. And that gives you such a wealth of knowledge for your organization. So that is a fantastic pool of resources to pull on. Now, I will also then go on to say that your contact center agents, your KM authors, we typically would say they shouldn't be your subject matter experts full time. And the longer we're out of the contact center, the more, I suppose, more things change that we may not be across. So you always want to make sure that you've got the right roles in place and the right workflows in place for your content to make sure that we're getting it reviewed and getting it approved and things like that through the right channels. I see some comments around if our slides have moved. No, we are still on slide 1, so we might move along to slide 2 before we run out of the entire webinar.
Hour.
Yeah.
Because we've gone through and set our content right, so we've got the right chunks, we've got the right template, we know who our audience is. My favorite topic in the world has got to be feedback. So tell us how that works in KM world.
Yeah, definitely. So feedback is also my favorite thing. It's the best sign of how engaged your users are with the tool. So I've walked into organizations and we've been talking about feedback and they say, yeah, no, we don't get any. So our KM is fantastic, spot on. No one has any problems with it. And that's where my sort of alarm bells start to ring. And I say, oh, is it that? Or is it that no one's accessing it because we don't trust it anymore and it's not serving the need that we're intending? So feedback is fantastic. As I said on the content side just before, KM is ever evolving. There is no organization that I've walked into and said, I want to change freeze while I deploy your new KM platform. I ask every single time, but I've never got it across the line because you can't ask for nothing to change in that period of time. So businesses are always changing and your KM must be ahead of the game and making sure that we have that content up to date before that change goes live. But feedback. So obviously when we've got that content in the right place and, all of our change management programs are going well and the database is up to date, there's always going to be something that is not working fantastically or there's areas that we can improve. So the type of feedback that we expect to see, unfortunately, we are humans, we aren't AI yet, is that something has been missed and something needs to be updated. So they may have found a fee or a code or, a product name that's no longer relevant. Unfortunately, it will slip through the cracks every now and then when you have some really big changes coming through. So letting us know that there's something wrong in the database, letting us know, hey, this is really clunky. It's really hard for us to follow this process while we've got someone on the phone. Is there a better way we can do it? Letting you know, hey, I really love it. Like, it's also great to get some positive feedback every now and then. So they're the types of things that we look for. We do knowledge management for organizations. So I've got a team who do manage services and we manage the feedback for the clients. We also have categories like skill gap. It is completely reasonable for someone to say, hey, this is wrong. And it comes down to the fact that maybe they weren't up to date. So we can close that out and say, we're going to have a little coaching session with you, but this is the type of information that we can get from the feedback. One of the most important things, so if your tool doesn't enable feedback, that is really, really challenging for your users. So you need to make sure you're opening lines of communication in some way so that they can communicate to whoever is responsible for the knowledge management or the knowledge in your organization. But let's say blue sky scenario, we have a feedback function within whatever platform we're using or whatever way we're managing knowledge. We then go in and we start to look at organizations and how they're managing the knowledge because it can be quite overwhelming. If you are having a really heavily engaged user base, you could expect on a contact center of 100 seats, you could expect up to sort of 20 pieces a day, potentially. Not all major change, but just little tweaks here and there or things that can be done differently. We need to know how we're going to manage that feedback. And that's one of the things we spend a lot of time working through with our clients. So in order to get particularly a contact center agent to submit feedback, they've got to probably go into after call work, spend some of that time quickly submitting feedback to you. They don't have a lot of time to give you a whole, breakdown of exactly what needs to change. So we need to make it as easy as possible. But then we also need to let them know that we're receiving it, because there's nothing worse than sending something off, never hearing back, and then going, well, I'm not going to send any feedback because you never do anything with it. I don't hear back from you and I don't know where it goes. So there's probably no one actioning it, is sort of the feelings that a lot of contact centers that we speak to have. So we work with our teams. We say, right, how are we going to manage this? Can we send it into a ticketing system, for example? Your organization may already have a ticketing system, and we can start to leverage some of the automations that you may receive from that, such as a ticket lands, a piece of feedback comes in and we automatically respond and say, thank you for your feedback. This is your ticket. We'll be in touch as we go through the process. Or in a previous life of mine, it was all done in Outlook, which is very fun. And it was a matter of spending the last 2 hours of the day responding to all of the feedback, sending through that we've received it, and then sending it off to the relevant teams or the relevant people to get the confirmation that that change needs to occur. We also then spend a lot of time thinking about what the SLAs around feedback need to be. So feedback can be seen as a bit of a nothing task or a bit annoying to some of our stakeholders. So we do need to have those things in place to make sure that we know when to follow up, how much time to leave it with the SME or leave it with the person who needs to respond to that before we go back and start to ask more questions. And then we also have, and we always recommend, if we've done that acknowledgement, thank you for sending your feedback. If we haven't got a response or a solution within a week, we'd usually go back to that agent and say, hey, just letting you know, we're still working on it. Watch this space. And then the final contact we would have with that agent is once it is closed. So if it's closed and updated, we want to make sure we're thanking them for their feedback and letting them know that it's been complete. They can go and have a look. Or it's, thanks for your feedback. Unfortunately, it might be that I don't like the way it's working. Well, unfortunately, we've done a review and this does meet the best practice design standards. We are going to leave it for the time being, but let us know if there's anything else that we can do differently, things like that. So just keeping your end users engaged is critical. So there used to be a slide that I would talk to that sort of said, which one's more important, governance over your knowledge base, the content over your knowledge base, or the engagement in your knowledge base? And a previous leader of mine made us all pick an element and do a debate. And of course, the intent of that was to come out and say that, your knowledge base is going to fail if all three of those elements aren't working really, really well together. So that engagement is critical. There's no point in having a knowledge base if we don't have engagement. You might have really great governance structures in place and really great content, but if the users aren't engaged, it's all for nothing. And that argument can be said all the way around that triangle there. So, Adam, what have I missed? Any extra points you think I need to point out here?
I think you've nailed everything around feedback. The only thing would be bonus points for best practice, and that's letting your people know what you're doing.
Yeah,
whether that's a monthly or a quarterly sort of email to say, hey guys, thanks heaps. We've received X number of pieces of feedback. We responded within this time. It's helped our knowledge base live and be alive and accurate. Feeding that information back can often help encourage others.
Yeah, for sure.
We see some great examples where organisations are setting up a self-service, whether it's through a SharePoint page, whether it's through their KM, that people can actually go in and see where their piece of feedback is. Once it's been accepted, they can actually track what's happening with it. And then we're seeing some organisations that are really stepping in and giving some of their frontline staff the opportunity, and Adam, it touches on your comment before about development, really actually letting them get involved in refining, reviewing and renewing, some of that approach. So it really gives that buy-in. So we love seeing how they're thinking of different ways to generate that engagement, Nick, because I think you're right. Without it, you can have the flashiest, coolest KM solution in the world, but if no one wants to use it, it actually doesn't help anyone. So
yeah, definitely.
One of my favorite quotes in leadership is people support what they help create.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. we always do. One of the big activities we do when we are rolling out new knowledge bases is we want to make sure that the end users know that this is for them. It's not for the contact center manager. It's not for the CEO. You know, we're building this for you. So let us know what you want. So we would always, if you are going down, if you're sitting here today saying, we're in SharePoint, we know it's not working for us, and we are going to deploy a new KM solution. You know, you do need to start thinking about templates. You need to think about design. You need to think about what these processes look like. And there's no one better than getting your end users into a room and saying, right, what is it that you love about what we've got right now? And what is it that you hate? What doesn't work? What works? All of those things. And then bring them back in to say, look, we're thinking of this particular template. We think this section here is going to be really useful for these reasons. And getting their buy-in, even if it's down to, it can be the really nitty-gritty stuff that doesn't mean much from the design point of view, but it means a lot to them. So, you know, we've got these 3 icons. What icon do you think is going to work well? What color do you want this to be? So it's not around getting their opinion for absolutely everything, because there's some things where, you know, as a business, it's, you know, writing text in hot pink is obviously not going to be accessible to everyone, and things like that. So there are some decisions that you just need to take off the table. But presenting options to your end users, that really starts the buy-in. You'll have some really great change champions who can go and build that excitement and get other people on board and say, this KM tool's coming, and I got to choose this, or we got to do this, and it's going to look like this, and blah, 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 blah. You start to build that excitement, and it really, really helps with the rollout if people feel like they've had a say in it, and it's there for them. So there are times where we get feedback, particularly in our managed services, where, you know, technically there's nothing wrong with the document. It does work well. It is adhering to best practice, but we do also sit back and say, well, what's the harm in changing it? Like, we're hearing from multiple people that this isn't, you know, it's not perfect for them. So what's the harm if we went and tried to redesign based on that feedback? So I know from my days as a knowledge manager within an organization, you know, I would get my back up. I'd be like, no, my content is perfect. You can't change it. That's not what's going to happen. But it's not about me as the knowledge manager anymore. It's around making sure I'm servicing the agents as best we can. So I think we also, oh, sorry, I was going to say, should we put up while we keep chitty-chatting?
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. So next poll, fantastic. While everyone's diligently completing that poll, there's a question here from Nicholas, and it's talking about that conceptually. How do you give the opportunity for that buy-in or that co-creation, collaboration when you're doing it? So if you had 1,000 end users, how many people do you think you'd need to do testing engagement with to, 1, get it reflective of everybody, and 2, improve the relationship?
Yeah, look, I think there's never going to be an exact answer or an exact science to this. It comes down a little bit to we use these engagement sessions also as a little bit of that development or recognition for great work as well. So you really want to choose a good range of people. You might run 1 or 2 workshops, or, you know, if you are sitting at that 1,000, you may, if you've got the time and the budget and all of that, you may run 4 design workshops just to get input from as many people as you can. But typically we, you know, if we bring the size down, we might be typically working with a contact center of 100 to 250 people. We would engage maybe 8 people in a room at a time, and we may run sort of 2 to 3 different design sessions if we're really trying to get that that engagement. But it's around ensuring we're getting the people in that you know are going to build that excitement. So you need the people who are going to come out and talk about it, not you know, not just kind of sit back and be like, oh, I'm just off the phones for half an hour or whatever that is. So it is around choosing the right personalities, the right people to come in and do that, and people who you can really see being those change champions, because then you might start to do other activities in the background as well to drive that engagement. So one of those things is, yes, we need to design and make sure it's reflective of everyone. As I sort of said, there are some things that you're just going to say, it's not a decision that we can let you guys make, because we know what best practice looks like in this tool from our training with the provider and our consultation with whoever else we brought in. But it's around what we can do. So other things we do to build engagement are let's run a competition for the naming of the tool. We've had some really interesting tool names come out. You know, there's a couple of clients, and it's really weird because we never give options because we don't want to be seen to be giving other people's names around. But you know, there's 3 or 4 organizations that come up with the same kind of name, and then others that come up with really obscure acronyms that you just never would have thought of. But it can build a lot of excitement throughout the contact center. And then going to marketing and saying, hey, we've got this name. Can you build a little persona and a little icon that we can upload into the tool and things like that? So yeah, there's a lot that we can kind of be doing there.
Nick, we sometimes see organisations, again, mindful, they've got a whole lot of people in frontline and they can't necessarily have everyone involved to the same level. And they do that. They run some workshops. They give people that opportunity as an initial, you know, involvement. We've seen surveys utilised in organisations. But we've also seen where teams will actually nominate like a champion to be their representative. And then it's about actually, you know, often it's about picking your person that's the loudest and the most vocal about how bad the system is, because you know they're already so invested that actually they become that first follower, and they're very influential on the floor. So there's lots of ways you can think about involving your people that don't necessarily mean they are all having to be in the room at the same time. You know, utilizing teams to then have really meaningful discussions about, you know, what's Nick going to present for us this time, or what's, you know, what are you hearing back? Really giving them that opportunity to step into almost leading a piece on behalf of them is a really powerful way to engage as well. So we see some great things like that. There is a question here from Jenny in relation to where you've got amazing engagement. And Jenny, I have seen this. The amazing engagement means you have overload of feedback. So those numbers, and quite often, you know, they become overwhelming themselves and actually create almost an industry. And sometimes, you know, all pieces of feedback are not created equally. I think you had on the last page, content is not all equal. I think sometimes feedback is the same way, but have you got some suggestions for that?
Look, I think it's got to come down to it is always going to be a balance. And I know there's always going to be conflicting priorities and where you need to divert your team's attention. But in my blue sky scenario where my unicorns exist and everyone is happy, we have a KM team who are there dedicated to managing your knowledge. So I have been that person, as I, sorry to keep making it sound like I've done everything, but it is the reality when it came to when we're managing particularly outsourced knowledge. I have been the key point for a particular account that was so much feedback was coming through. And it becomes very easy to sort of focus on the change management and focus on everything else that's coming out and let the feedback fall off. But that is just going to lose your engagement. So it does need to become a priority. You do need to make sure that you're setting that time aside to acknowledge and update. And I really like what Fran was saying, and maybe it is around enabling some form of self-service ability. And I know a lot of the KM tools that we work with, and we haven't mentioned to date so far in the webinar, but USU, our partner, is a KM platform, and they have that feedback internally, and users can go to a particular view within the knowledge base and see where that feedback is up to. So it doesn't necessarily need to be completely, you know, if you're working through Outlook, then yeah, we need to have templates ready to just shoot off to say, hey, thanks so much, and let's streamline it as much as we can. But it can't be, you know, let's pick and choose what feedback we're gonna take through. It really does need to be a priority to keep that engagement, because once you start to lose engagement of these tools is where you start to go back to all of the problems that you had previously, and it is such an uphill battle to re-engage users when it's not a big, hey, look, we've got a new tool. And that's not always the solution. You don't need to go and get a new tool in order to re-engage them. It's just around how can we keep that engagement. So whether it's sharing, hey, and you know, to Adam's point, we could do a monthly report back to the users, say we received 7,000 pieces of feedback this month. So bear with us while we get through it all. Like we are still responding. So I think it's just around helping your team to prioritize, helping them to set aside time to manage that feedback. And when I was working for organization, it was, you know, from 2 o'clock till 5 o'clock, whoever in the team had been allocated feedback for that day we were doing 3 hours of feedback management around all the other meetings and things like that we were going to. So it might just be around how you can clear the way to make sure that you've got one person trying to get through as much as they can in that day. But if you stay on top of it, that's what makes it easier as well. So it's when you've left it for a little bit and it becomes overwhelming. But, you know, if you are getting 30 pieces a day, it's around, right, let's send the triage off first, then let's send it out to the relevant SMEs that need to have a look at it. We might put the document into a workflow straight to them for review. We might say, hey, you've got 3 pieces of feedback that relate to this document. Can you review it all at the same time? Just to try and help streamline it. But I would really, it is a challenge, but I would really say feedback just needs to stay a priority, to stay on top of it and keep that engagement up, particularly if that's the problem you're having, is a really well-engaged team.
Nick, could it be fair to say?
Oh, sorry, you go, Adam. You go.
Oh, sorry, Fran. I was going to say, would it be fair to say that you almost at some point get to forget that it's KM feedback as well, and standard data management rules apply. So if I'm building a template, how can I categorize feedback so that as it comes through to me without reading it, I can prioritize, I can divvy up. You know, the cadence around having a meeting every morning to go, hey, we're sitting on 300 pieces of feedback, or 10 or 20. And again, having those classifications or categories to be able to best understand what's sitting in the queue. And any visibility you can provide to your staff around, hey, before you go to give me a feedback on this document, when you see that there's another 10 pieces of feedback already received, maybe just check them before they come through. And other similar sort of approaches around communicating, so that it's a two-way communication. They've got access to information. You're trying to categorize and feed the data through to your people as streamlined as possible. Some of those tips and techniques can help.
Yeah, I think that works in theory. But, you know, thinking about contact center agents and the time they have, asking them to go and look at what other feedback. And also, sometimes when you get 10 pieces of the same feedback, it just goes to show how important that one piece of feedback and that we actually need to prioritize that. So it can certainly be on both sides of that argument. And you know, one of the ways that customer driven solved it when we first started and we had big managed service clients, we were getting lots of feedback. Sometimes it's around investing in your people and investing in the technology that you're giving them. So we bought in a ticketing system so that we could actually see what SLAs were about to breach without having to rely on Outlook flags and things like that. So sometimes there will be other things that you can bring in to help, but it may or may not be a possibility within your organization. So
Data management.
Quite often, Nick, it's going to be there's going to be a seasonality to this as well quite often. Yeah. So again, you've just launched a new system. People are highly engaged and very enthusiastic because you've built this whole program about connecting with them. Then you get feedback. The last thing you want to do is not deal with it then and there, because as you say, you've got this one chance. But equally, as you start to address that and as they get some maturity within the system, you might see some of that stuff drop off. Yes. Then a new program gets launched or a new initiative or a new piece of legislation, which again builds that cycle in. But I think key to it is, how do you create, number one, visibility about what's happening. You need to give a really strong process, so people need to understand how they can participate in feedback, and then actually validate it. You know, keep them, you know, value what they've given you, and do something with it. So, you know, I think it's such an important element to actually keep people wanting to actually tell you when things aren't working. The last thing you want is them to stop giving you feedback.
Exactly. And we always sort of talk about when we roll out new environments, and when you do roll out a new KM, for example, or a new template, we see a peak in feedback. So for a complete new rollout, we'd see a peak in feedback for about 3 months, and then it will dip back down. So yes, completely to that point, if it is a new platform, it will ease back. So that's great. Now I am terrified. It's 12:44 and we are only on number 2. So
let's keep going.
The next two are follow a similar vein to this one as far as looking at data management.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of what Fran was just talking to there as well. So all of this, you know, once we have all of our content in and our feedback in, and, you know, our announcements going through the tool, analytics is your best friend. So we see a lot of organizations who either don't have access to analytics, and it makes it really, really hard for them to know what's going on, or there's tools that do have access, but they don't really understand what they're seeing and what that means. So we really want to focus on what analytics are available to us and what valuable insights are they actually giving us. We think that, not we think, the analytics that we look to can provide really, really valuable insights around who is actually accessing information. So that's a really basic one, but who's accessing what? And that can tie into a lot of your coaching and quality conversations. So we've had access on some of our managed service clients into their quality management team as well. And we can start to cross-pollinate your data to say, well, Nicola handled a call about electricity at this time and she failed her quality. And when we look at what she was doing in her knowledge base, she was looking at gas. So of course she failed. She wasn't accessing the right document, for example. So we can start to tie that all back in to really have informed quality conversations and coaching conversations. We can start to have a look at trends that are going on in your environment, why people are accessing certain documents. Does it correlate back to what was going on in your contact center at that point in time? And start to feed that up. So you really need to find the who cares and so what's about all of this information and start to feed that in, because KM is, as Adam said right up front, it's one of the boring ones, unfortunately. I get really passionate about it, but not many people get as passionate about KM as I am, unless they're working in a KM platform or in my team. So it can be one of the things that a lot of organizations say, yeah, it's a nice to have, but it's not for us right now. But when you get these analytics and these insights, you can really start to drive the whys and the the so what's and what does that mean, and start to provide information that helps to inform those decisions going on around your business. I'm thinking.
Is it fair to say that you could group the data or the questions that you're trying to answer with the data into distinct categories? As far as if I'm a team leader or similar, I might be comparing that data to some of the performance stuff, as you said, with quality, because I'm looking to understand behaviors and ways to support my person at a fairly intimate level. Whereas if I'm sitting in your team, I might be looking at usage overall, as far as engagement, feedback, SLAs around feedback management, and working in the system and how to improve it from that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. There will certainly be different people that care about different things. I care about, when I jump into my team's databases, I care about what documents are in workflow, how long they've been in workflow, how many times have they been updated in a certain period of time. That's the kind of insights that we really look for, and we pull out to sort of see what value we're providing to our customers. So we want to make sure that the content is being updated in the timelines that we've committed to. You'll certainly have your team leaders and your contact center managers who want to know, as a whole, how are the teams going? As an individual, how is that person going? You will have, we've got petal number 3 of our flower, announcements. So we would encourage people to use announcements through the tool. So who's accessing, who didn't understand the comms that went out? Do we need to do quizzes and comprehension checks to try and help people get there? All of that is going to be housed within your analytics. So depending on what functionalities you're using of the tool, the analytics that sits within your knowledge management to provide valuable insights is it's huge. But I suppose it's around the so what and who cares, and making sure that you've got them and giving them the information that's important to help them drive the knowledge management journey. And some people are sort of, in our polls so far, have been saying that budget is a constraint. A good KM solution is going to provide you return on investment in reduction in training, reduced handle time, reduced hold time, reduction in compliance and regulatory breaches. Like, there's more than that, but they're just a few off the top of our head that we can expect, and the analytics behind your database are going to help to prove that in as well. So yeah, I think
Would it
where you connect to customer as well, I think, is another really important thing for organizations. Gain where your agents are going as far as the tracking within content and how far they're needing to go, gives you insights into the volume or the interactions that need that same iteration.
Yeah.
It's actually going to help you build information differently for your consumers, so your customers.
And sorry, I've been very focused on contact centers and agents, but how are we using our push to web strategy? How is our AI interacting with it? All there's so much more that's now coming into play, that those analytics and having something that provides you with that information is going to be critical to maintain the success and ensuring that message is consistent across all channels.
Because I think you could call a knowledge management scorecard, as far as the SLAs that look at effective knowledge management, that could be a scorecard for your knowledge management team, or that could be a scorecard for your AI chatbot as to how smart it is, how frequently the information's updated, all of those sort of things. So I often think about when organizations talk about, I want to put AI, or I want to have a chatbot sit across. Well, knowledge is pretty up to date. Yeah, no, the website's all right. Actually knowing at an intimate level whether it's up to date, the frequency of updates, how that whole machine works, I think is critically important to sleeping at night and knowing whether your AI chatbot's actually telling furfies or whether it's supportive of your people.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all heard about AI hallucinations and things like that, and that's one of the key reasons that we are seeing hesitation in the market to jump straight into AI. And hallucinations come from a wide range of things, but one of them is there's conflicting information in the knowledge that you're giving it, and it has to fill in the gaps as to which option it wants to provide. So it's always going to come back down to your garbage in, garbage out type answer there.
In interest of time, do we want to move to the next element? But I'll just make one comment, because we're really focused in these webinars around gifting you some value to walk away with, something that you can use if you never speak to us again. Of course, we'd love to see you on our doorstep regularly, but keen on offering value. What we'll follow up the webinar with is a bit of a breakdown of what we've spoken to, the poll results that you've put in, and based on the poll results, we'll focus. I noticed that last one, there's a bit, the result was, there's a few more people that are looking for knowledge and skill as to what to do with the data and the analytics. So we'll tailor what we send out around that. I'll try and get it done as quickly as possible, but within the week we'll send you out some info to support this.
Thanks, Adam, and we'll include that with the recording so people can review back and connect in.
Perfect.
I think we've saved the most boring sounding one for last.
I know, but it's my favorite. Oh, I say everything's my favorite. I really am a KM nerd, aren't I? Anyway, that's all right. So audits, they are always forgotten, or we just lost track of time. We didn't realize it had been so long, but they are critical. And no matter what tool you're in, you can still do your audits right now. And no matter where you are on your KM journey, your audits should be, in a blue sky scenario, every 6 months, but at least every 12 months, you target an element of your database. So particularly in environments where authorship is not locked down, you will find a lot of content, whether it's duplicated content, redundant content, information that you just don't even know where it came from. If it's possible for people to upload information, it's going to get there. So an audit is going to help you make sure that you target at certain points. It's not always the same things, but you might first off start by targeting information that hasn't been accessed in 12 months. Let's have a look at what's going on with that information. Why has it not been accessed? You might look at information that hasn't been through a workflow in the last 6 months. So let's see, is there anything here that should have gone through workflow? Is there anything here that should have been reviewed? Is it not going through workflow because no one's accessing it, because it's no longer relevant, because it was a campaign that went live 6 years ago and we don't need it in the tool anymore? And so your audit is around making sure that your content is accurate, your content is up to date, and there's only relevant information in here. So it is okay to archive information from a knowledge base. It's highly encouraged to archive information from a knowledge base. A lot of you may have regulatory requirements that says knowledge still needs to be there 7 years from the date that you used it, whatever that is. You can move things out of people's access and keep the file and keep the audit trail and things like that, so that you've got that in the case you needed to refer back to it. But let's really think about what is going out to our agents to make sure that they are getting really streamlined search results. They're getting the clear information that they need, and they've got the up-to-date information. An audit, if you are looking at moving into an AI journey and connecting in with your knowledge base, please, please, please start with an audit, do some reports, have a look at what's going on, and get that content reviewed and up to date. So our final poll, we appreciate everyone contributing to date or to so far with all of our slides.
Can I just have a shout out? There's one participant out there that clearly has an outstanding operation, and hats off, because these aren't easy things to achieve, and to be able to tick the box for each of these and outstanding is no small feat.
Definitely, certainly agree with that.
One
Nick,
thing
sorry, I was just going to say there's one question in our Q&A that I did say we'd get to, and it goes back to, you know, some of what you've talked about is around that structured content, and the question from Julia was specifically around how do you structure content so that it meets most users' needs.
That is
again, you know, it's the age-old challenge, right, of KM.
It definitely is. Let me start off by saying my preference to answer this question would be that something other than Word and PDFs and things like that is certainly beneficial to start with. But, you know, when I design a knowledge base, we go in and we look at the different ways people are going to navigate to information. So if you have gone to a new contemporary KM solution, we're going to have welcome pages. We can allow people to navigate via an index or a click through from the homepage to different topics. We want to make sure they can do a search, because most users are used to Google-like searches these days. We want to give them other options, whether it's a folder structure, a map, you know, a process map that they can click through. So we start off by looking at how they can navigate to content. And then we would also look at, so procedures are typically your most challenging ones to design for multiple user groups. So we always talk about our agents who are in training versus our agent who has been on the phone for 5 years and just needs a snippet of information. So a platform, the USU platform particularly, allows us to section processes and procedures down to manageable chunks of information. And then we can click through. So you might have 4 or 5 tasks within a procedure. It might be first, identify your customer. Second, navigate to account details. Third, update relevant details. And fourth, say this script. So we want to give people options to sort of jump in at that section that they need help with. So if I'm first day on the phones and I'm terrified like I was, I'm going to start on step 1 and I'm going to read every single bullet point and I'm going to follow the bouncing ball. There'll be decision tables saying, ask the customer if they're, you know, if they need to change their surname because they've been married. If yes, we're going to go to task 3, which is around updating for name change for marriage. If no, we're going to do whatever the next step is. So it's around giving sort of a choose your own adventure type scenario to those procedures and bringing it down to just manageable chunks of information that we can jump out to at different times. And so the benefit of doing that is that, yeah, your day 1 agent can start at step 1, end at step 5. Your tenured agent might just need to remember what that script was. They're going to jump straight in, click the task or click where they know that script is and get that information. So that's one way we design content. But there's also things like accordions or secondary windows that allow you to collapse information down. You really want to give the user who needs more support the option to opt in to get that information so that we're not cluttering the page that everyone has to consume it all. We give a sort of, if you need more information, click here for that information, and it will kind of work from there. But it certainly is going to depend on what tool you're working with as to what functionalities you've got in order to design for those needs.
It's a nice goal though, right? That people can step in at the point that actually suits their immediate need. And it might be different depending on the product they're working with. There's another quick question here, and I know we're just about at time, but it is specifically saying, are there any recommendations on knowledge management standards or formalised best documents and checklists, etc.? And I know you guys have a whole lot of information that would be great if we could actually send out to all of the participants around that, because I know the knowledge you guys have is super rich and really comprehensive.
Yeah, I don't think You got.
I'll just blindly commit to sending out some information. That's not a short question to answer,
Yeah.
but a really good one. So let's package up some stuff and share it with the group. Also, based on time, welcome any questions whatsoever over email, and we'll commit to answering those in the document we send out afterwards, to try and help folk. There's also this summary slide at the end. Nick, would you like me to have a crack at feeding back?
I'd love to. I'm just looking
Sure.
at Luke's chat, and I might try and chat while you summarize then. Fantastic.
So we've looked at the 4 elements. Not all content is created equal, and as we were just talking about, there's a plethora of information as to how to focus or how to present that to your staff in a helpful way. So breaking it into content chunks so you can separate a procedure from contextual information or other is incredibly helpful. Designing out a template and the way that you present that information to folk is also incredibly important to make sure it's easy on the eye and easy to access whilst in the middle of a call. Roles and responsibilities, not that we spoke to it too much, but as another powerful tool, so that if the computer system knows or the knowledge management system knows who I am, it can present me the relevant content. Feedback is king in, I think, most spaces, but certainly knowledge management. Engaging your team, having a two-way conversation around what happens with the feedback and where you're processing it is all important elements to drive engagement. Using data to inform decisions, coaching and quality conversations sounds like it should apply to everything in contact centre land, but certainly for knowledge management. Understanding the data that's available to you and understanding the specific questions that you're looking to answer across the different audiences. And obviously doing that on a frequent basis is important. And audits. Building confidence and trust, as we've just spoken about. A big task can be a challenging task, but incredibly important, and scheduling that every 6 months ideally, or 12 months if not, to make sure that you're looking at the health of your knowledge base is incredibly important. Now, we'll elaborate on these points in the info that we send out so that you can refer back to them. Would wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up the phone or email for a conversation with Nick and the team to find out about a bit more. Do want to have a shout out to our sponsor and partner, USU. Whilst we are a technology agnostic organisation, which means we'll work in any platform and meet clients where they're at. Technology is not kids, and we can call out our favourite, and USU is certainly it for us, in that we believe it's got the feature set and the balance around cost effective to deliver most organisations what they need in a tailored fashion. But enough of the senseless plugs. Thank you all so very much today. KM's a topic that we're all passionate on and keen to share. So let's keep the conversation going and reach out to Nick soon.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Nick. And yeah, I think we could nerd out over KM for any amount of time. There is a question in there asking if there'll be another webinar to connect on the other parts of your dial. So we'll work together to see if there's an opportunity for that in the very near future. But thanks everybody for coming along. As always, we hope you got plenty out of it. Great topic and something that really builds the foundation for great service, and without it you're kind of running blind. So yeah, thanks, and we'll see you next time. Fantastic. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.